So in this lesson, we're going to be trying to answer the question, does sentiment differ between the different news types? So for example, does factual news have a more positive or more negative skewed sentiment as compared to the fake news dataset? Let's work through some sentiment analysis and try to answer this question. We're going to be using the Vader sentiment calculation to get our sentiment analysis. So we'll start by initializing the sentiment analyzer. So we create Vader sentiment, and this equals our sentiment intensity analyzer. We then want to create a column for our sentiment score. So within our data frame, we create the column Vader sentiment score. We then take the data.text column. So we're going to be using the raw data to calculate this. We apply the lambda function and take our Vader sentiment polarity score from our text. We then want to just take the compound from this output. If we now print out the first few rows of our dataset, we can see our Vader sentiment score with the relevant sentiment score for each of our documents. We want to classify this into positive, negative, and neutral sentiment. So first we want to specify the bins. So we create our bins from -1 to -0.1. This is going to be our negative classification. From -0.1 to positive 0.1, this is going to be our neutral sentiment. And anything from 0.0.1 above up to 1 is going to be our positive sentiment. We then create our Vader sentiment label column and use the pdcut function. This function takes our Vader sentiment score column, chops it up by the different bins, and gives them the labels that we specified in our names above. Again, let's just run data.head to check our working. Perfect, so you can see here all the sentiment scores that are less than -0.1 have been classified as negative, and there's a few positives in there as well that have been correctly categorized. Let's now see if we can use this to answer the question of whether sentiment differs between the two different types of news articles we have. We want to create a bar chart of the different labels in each of the data. We'll first start by just looking overall how many positive, negative, and neutral sentiments we have across the whole dataset. So we'll use data Vader sentiment label .value counts .plot .bar, and the color will be our default plot color. So from looking at this chart, you can see that overall we've got a few more news articles with a positive sentiment as opposed to a negative sentiment. And we've just got a few neutrals in there. Most of them have been classified as positive or negative. Let's now look at how this varies between the two types of news articles we have. So we want to use sns.countplot. Our X is our fake or factual column. Our hue, so our color, is our Vader sentiment label. And the color palette we're going to use is the SNS color palette HLS. We also want to set the title, so we're going to call this Sentiment by News Type. So let's look at this plot and what it tells us. When looking at the fake news, we can see there's a pretty even split between positive and negative sentiment, and a few neutrals in there, but there isn't really a massive skew to one or the other. In our factual news dataset, if you just look behind the legend, you can see that positive does skew more in this dataset. So we have a few more positive articles as opposed to negative in the factual news dataset. There's also a lot less neutrals in this. So the differences aren't drastic. So I don't think you could say at this moment that factual news skews more positive and fake news is a little bit more evenly distributed. It would require a bit more of a deep dive. One thing we could also do is try to change the method we've used of determining sentiment. So we could experiment with different rule-based models, or we could implement the pre-trained transformers that we're now comfortable in using. Now that we've had a look at our sentiment analysis, let's move on to exploring topics within this dataset.